Turkey's agenda is very busy in the context of Turkey's counterterrorism operation in Syria, but today we are going to talk about a very important topic, which is Afghanistan and the transformation of Afghanistan in terms of politics, in terms of security, local, regional, and international, and how the international actors is going to, will respond to the transformation of Afghanistan. Today, we have three distinguished speakers. So first of all, I'm going to start with the Ambassador Abdulrahim Said Can to listen his thinking about Afghanistan, how Afghanistan is under, transformation, how we should understand the Afghanistan in the context of regional and international politics. So the Ambassador, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Talking about Afghanistan, in their invitation, nothing was specific, so I just saw the title. So I'll try to be brief enough, and if there be a discussion, then I receive some question, maybe it will be much easier for me to answer. But I'd like to brief you regarding the recent development in Afghanistan. I think that if you go back to the histories, how these situations come up, that takes time. But one thing is necessary, that why we are in this situation in Afghanistan. From all Afghanistan people point of view, the situation is because of the foreign involvement in Afghanistan. It started from the invasion of the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, and then different coups d'etats with the assistance and help of foreign countries, and then rebellion against those occupation, and then the involvement of all players. At that time, it was a Cold War. So those who were against the Soviets, they supported very clearly the resistance, and the Soviet bloc supported the regime. And our neighbors were the supporter of that time, the resistance. And that situation continue. And very simply, if anybody see Afghanistan, sometimes people are comparing the time of Russia, Soviet's occupation, and also this time of the involvement of the international community. So there are interpretation of different people in different way. From official, in the government point of view, the involvement of the international community in supporting the government of Afghanistan is legitimate, and it is given a permission under the articles of the United Nations, giving the right for the countries to defend from their security. Now, these days, I'm also sometimes concerned that Turkey, for example, is entering Syria because of their security for the same reason. And Europe, America, and most of the countries now involved in Afghanistan, and they are partner in fight against terrorism in Afghanistan. So the same way that, for example, you are entering Syria to fight against terrorism. The same thing, so that there is a difference. But at that time, at the time of the Soviet, there was no terrorism. It was a coup d'etat, and coup d'etat was supported one circle of the political parties, and they come and support it, and finally they invade because they understand that the resistance day by day is increasing, and they invade Afghanistan. But today's presence of the international community and their involvement is completely different. I mean, from our point of view, it is not occupation. In Afghan government and intellectual, always they are saying that the NATO forces, if they go beyond the mandate that they've given to them, then the definition will be changed. Now they're the partner. They should help the Afghan government to fight against terrorism and support the Afghan people to construct their country and make the institution. And this happened from 2001. After 2001 till now, this is the situation. We had elections, we have institutions. I mean, full-time election took place. Democracy is, in Afghanistan, has its difficulties, but there is no other way. We have to go to election, we have to work on that. So we had parliamentary election, we had presidential election full-time. In this last time was 28th of September, and now we are waiting for the result. Hopefully, after the election, everybody accept, and the expectation is that the election commission work independently and announce, and everybody accept that. And this is what the international community in Afghanistan also supporting the election commission to be impartial and clear the votes which are fraud from the clear votes. The biometric system have worked, so it's working. Hopefully it's work, and anyone be announced by the election commission to be acceptable for all. At the same time, the peace process in Afghanistan started. So there was, we were stuck between two things. There was two tracks. Track of peace process, which United States with the Taliban started. And the Afghanistan government believed that those kind of involvement, of foreign involvement in the peace process may help the process of negotiation between government and the Taliban. So that somehow failed because they couldn't succeed to convince the Taliban to sit with the government. So we could not wait for the result of that negotiation. We continued to take preparation for the election. Election turnout was not so high this time. It has its own reasons. One of the reasons can be security, that Taliban warned that the people cannot vote if we would do so. But our, alhamdulillah, our national defense forces took the security very well at that time of the election. Not big incidents happened. The other reason was that this peace process of the negotiation between Americans and Taliban in Doha makes some of the candidates, put them in a position that they were thought that maybe if the American reach some understanding with the Taliban and Taliban sit with the government, then the government may reach some kind of agreement. If the ceasefire come and the involvement of Taliban, then maybe the election may be postponed. So this also discouraged some of the people to continue campaign. So they could not mobilize enough people. The other reason was that our election commission, before presidential election, in the parliamentary election, they were not that much successful. The announcement of the result took almost 6 months. So some people lost their hope that maybe this election or democracy may not work. That's why we had a registration of 9 million people. From that, this is what the election commission has announced, is 2.7 million people participated. But still, from our constitution, it is legal. I mean, whatever. I mean, the low participation doesn't mean that it is not legal. I mean, the result, whatever it's come, it is acceptable. Hopefully, we will have that one. So the other problem is that still the fighting continues. The problem is that those who are involved in Afghanistan, they are not honest with the peace process yet. At least they have not convinced the Afghanistan people. If they could convince that to tell Taliban that not attack or not provide them the logistics, the ammunition, the things, so then they can also force them to bring them to the table. So that's not happening, honestly. So that's why the fighting is still going on. The Taliban have presence in most of the provinces as a guerrilla forces. They attack, go. They are not controlling except, I think, around 33 or something districts they are controlling. The rest, they are mobilizing, for example, for somewhere and attack another and then escape. And in our national defense forces, that they have the capability to defend the geography of the country. Till now, they are fighting, but fighting going on. The casualty, unfortunately, is very high. And the urban activity of these terrorist activities in the cities, that is a big concern for the people. A lot of casualty is from that suicidal attack. This is another concern. But still, we have the support of the international community, his presence, and Turkey is part of that, and we are thankful of them. And hopefully, together, we could defeat the terrorists in Afghanistan and to have a stable country and continue with the reform and reconstruction that we had. We have institutions, we have parliament, we have constitution. If there be any change, if we reach some kind of understanding with the Taliban, so Taliban can also come and participate in this process. For the peace process, there is no specific condition. For the start of the negotiation, our government have announced that we are ready. But without negotiation directly with the government of Afghanistan, if they negotiate with, sometimes they go to Moscow, sometimes to Beijing, sometimes to talk with Washington, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. They can be the guarantor, but they cannot bring peace or without the involvement of the government. So we are expecting, hopefully, that the Taliban, after this new government forms, they again come directly, sit with the Afghanistan government and to reach some understanding. Then inshallah, Afghanistan has very big potential, young people, good geography, who have the mines, the wealth of the Afghanistan underground is not touched yet. Maybe the war have destroyed us on the ground, but underground they could not done it yet. And hopefully future Afghanistan could be useful in part of the international community to work for peace and stability. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Tanya, of course, it is not possible to understand the Afghanistan by focusing on internal dynamics. We have to look at the regional dynamics as well as international dynamics, how we can make sense about regional politics around the Afghanistan, how the regional actors see the Afghanistan in terms of the potential solution.
Thank you for having me take part in this discussion. Now, I would like to build on what His Excellency the Ambassador said about the interests of regional players and how this has impacted Afghanistan's conflict over the last few decades. The interests of neighboring countries often overlap and other times conflict in Afghanistan. It's an intersection of regional interests, a place where warlords and politicians are supported by regional rivals and where regional rivals often compete against each other. It's a place where competition for influence plays out among competitors such as India, Pakistan, Russia, China, and Iran. Its geographic location, as you can see behind me, puts it at the center of multiple security constituencies: NATO versus Russia, India versus Pakistan, Iran versus Saudi Arabia. And this competition has kept Afghanistan in a state of internal conflict for 40 years, even with the democratic project underway since 2001. So what are the interests of regional nations, regional rivals, and how do they intersect? So let's take a very brief look at each of them, starting with Pakistan. For Pakistan, Afghanistan has always been about a friendly regime in Kabul, not peace, not stability. A friendly regime gives it strategic depth against countries such as India, and it also allows it to extend its influence around the Central Asian region. But Afghan officials tell me that Pakistan's quest for strategic depth is no longer limited to military purposes and has evolved to take on other dimensions. Pakistan's broader objective seems to seek significant economic, political, and ideological influence in Afghanistan, an influence which denies India the ability to install a friendly government in Kabul and prevent India from competing with Pakistan for influence in the Central Asian region. In fact, much of Pakistan's policy is rooted in a pathological obsession with India. Economically, Pakistan's desire to keep Afghanistan and Central Asia away from an Indian sphere of influence is evident in the Afghan Trade and Transit Agreement of 1965, which denies overland routes to India and ensures Afghanistan remains overly dependent on Pakistan for trade. Ideologically and politically, Pakistan's desire for regional influence, especially against India, includes strategies such as invoking Islam and shared traditions among Central Asian countries, and this influence is felt in Afghanistan. Pakistan also strengthens its position on Kashmir by mustering support from Islamic countries, such as Afghanistan. But moving on to India. India seeks to pursue its interests and wants to continue to pursue its interests through a democratic and constitutional government in Kabul. A democratic government friendly to India is one way to contest or push back on Pakistan's strategic depth. India also builds this friendly relationship and antagonizes Pakistan through assistance, aid, and economic programs. Since 2001, India has pledged a total of $2 billion in development projects in Afghanistan, and Pakistan has concerns about India's motivations. Afghan analysts, for example, have made the case that the $236 million Shatut Dam on the Kabul River is critical to resolving Afghanistan's critical water shortage, while Pakistani officials contend that this is part of India's grand plan to strangle Pakistan's limited water supply. Yet it's not one dam that worries Pakistan. India has assisted Afghanistan with studies on a total of 12 dams to be built on the Kabul River, which could generate megawatts of power for Afghanistan, but could also reduce the water flow into Pakistan. Water, some might say I'm overemphasizing water, but water is not only to drink, it's not only to power electricity, but it's also a national security issue. In 2011, a report prepared by the US Senate Committee on Foreign Relations identified water pressures as a regional security threat. For outside countries, the report says providing the right support can have a tremendous stabilizing influence, but providing the wrong support can spell disaster by agitating neighboring countries. And the report goes on to say there's no better example of this than the Indian assistance in Afghanistan. If the water issues sour Pakistan's relationship with its neighbors, repercussions will be felt all over the world, but especially in Afghanistan. For Iran, not unlike Pakistan, water sharing with Afghanistan is a major issue, but so is border security concerns against Taliban incursions, and so is reducing Saudi influence. First on water. While this is rarely discussed in mainstream media, the ongoing drought in the region has brought the decades-old water dispute between the two neighboring countries higher on the national agendas. Water from the Helmand River is, in principle, shared with Iran under a 1973 treaty, but because of 40 years of war, the supply has been erratic at best. Afghanistan's agriculture, a mainstay of the country's meager $20 billion economy, has been brutally hit by the drought, Nearly 20 million people in Afghanistan rely on farming, and the sector saw a 45% decrease last year. The drought has also caused protests in Iran, and as a result of water shortages and Afghanistan's announcement in April 2018 that it would pursue dams and reservoir projects caused alarm in Tehran, fearing that its supplies would be cut. So the Afghan government says Iran has received well above its agreed share of water, but the accusations are that Tehran has been helping the Taliban fight an Iranian proxy war over water. Some Afghan politicians have surmised that Tehran wants to maintain instability in Afghanistan in order to control the resources, but Iranians deny this, saying that they need to maintain cordial relations with the Taliban in order to secure their border areas, which are often subject to incursions. But they insist that they are supportive of the Afghan government. Moving on to Russia, the most important interest, and again this may be disputed, but the most important interest of Russia is terrorism, not just in Afghanistan, and not just on its borders, but throughout the Central Asian region. For decades, Russia has called its southern borders the Ark of Instability. So the increased terrorism activity in Afghanistan's northern provinces, close to the borders of former Soviet republics, is a major concern for Moscow. According to a June 2019 UN report, there are over 20 regional and international terrorist groups operating in Afghanistan, among them ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And these can flow into the former Soviet republics and onward to Russia. At the same time, the Russian government wants to play the role of peacemaker in Afghanistan as a spoiler to American influence and expand its influence in the overall region. And it is exactly as it is doing in Europe via Ukraine, Crimea, and the Baltics, and in the Middle East via Syria and elsewhere. So what does Russia want from Afghanistan? Moscow needs a stable, predictable, and geopolitically neutral Kabul that will not be a safe haven for terror groups. And another component, some may argue, is its expansionist foreign policy. Finally, China. For China, strengthening ties with Afghanistan has two major objectives. In the short term, cutting off links between the Taliban and the Chinese Uyghurs. But in the long term, the objective is economic. Regarding economics, Beijing is now Afghanistan's largest business investor and has pledged an ever-increasing amounts of aid to the country, particularly in extraction and construction projects. For example, China won the $4.4 billion extraction contract to develop the Mes Aynak copper field. It also won the bid for oil exploration in the Amu Darya Basin in northern Afghanistan. And it is developing extensive railway networks as part of its Sino-Afghanistan Special Railway Transportation Project, connecting China, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Iran, and Afghanistan. Afghan officials I've spoken to, however, are skeptical, and they say that China isn't all that big of an investor, that it's all talk, and it's actually stalling on renewing some of those contracts in order to renegotiate them on better terms. Whatever the case, it's clear that China views the instability in Afghanistan as an opportunity to make inroads into a war-ravaged country. It sees an opportunity to obtain strategic materials such as copper, oil, lithium, and to expand Chinese exports in order to absorb some of its surplus production. In the future, Chinese would also like to extend the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, to Afghanistan as well. We're looking at projects worth $62 billion that include highways, railways, and energy infrastructure. Now, let me tie all this into the incumbent President Ashraf Ghani's regional connectivity plan. Not much is discussed about this. Mainstream media tends to focus on the violence, the election, and all of that. But Ashraf Ghani's plan has been to turn Afghanistan from a proxy battlefield into an Asian roundabout for trade. Before he assumed office, the country was overly reliant on Pakistan for the largest part of its imports, and this gave Pakistan a great advantage over the landlocked country. Islamabad was repeatedly able to block routes to pressure the Afghan government, and this is why diversifying trade routes became one of Ashraf Ghani's top priorities to counterpoise the trade with Pakistan. The cornerstone of this strategy has been to use Afghanistan's location as its main asset, the only land bridge between South and Central Asia. Regional power transmission lines, gas pipelines, railway and highway projects all are in the implementation phase with tangible outcomes. The latest breakthrough in Afghanistan's regional connectivity with its western neighbors was the revitalization of the ancient Lapis Lazuli route late last year. So let me finish by trying to tie all this together. Afghanistan, for years, has been a battleground for regional interests, a place where these interests overlap and often conflict. Some countries see Afghanistan as a country to exploit, others see Afghanistan as a country to romance. These conflicting interests have tugged at Afghanistan for years, and this helps to explain the enduring instability and insecurity. My view is that the Afghan government, current Afghan government, fully recognizes this and seeks to define these relationships on Kabul's terms rather than on the terms of outside capitals, and using its unique assets of geographical position, extensive minerals, and extensive water for the interests of its people. Afghanistan is a work in progress. It has been for several centuries, and we hope it will be a success. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you, Tanya. So, Dr. Murad, it is believed that Turkey is playing a vital role in Afghanistan and will probably play a role in the future of Afghanistan. By taking into consideration Tanya's perspectives about the regional countries' policies vis-à-vis Afghanistan, can you elaborate Turkey in the context of the NATO mission, and particularly Turkey's strategy in Afghanistan?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me check time. Okay. Okay, I think I should answer this question by asking 3 additional questions, sub-questions. The first one is why Afghanistan is important, not only for Turkey, but for everybody. And the other guests briefly explained it. And the other one is, what did NATO achieve or did not achieve in Afghanistan till now? And third, how did Turkey engage and also contribute to the current situation, or could not contribute? That's another aspect of the question. Well, as Tanya expressed briefly, Afghanistan is important, really important, because it's hub of many cultures. If Greece is perceived as the basis of the Western culture, then we can claim that Afghanistan is the location that Eastern culture has arisen, because we witness the traces of all cultures surrounding Afghanistan. We see the traces at the north of Turkics, Indians, Pakistanis, and in some parts, Iranians, Tajiks. So we have ethnicities, but they represent the richness of every culture in this country. On the other hand, we have to care the geography. If you just give an attention to the map, you can see that it starts from China and goes towards Iran. Then Afghanistan is a kind of step either towards north, to the Central Asia, or to the Southern Asia, or to the Iran and, Anatolia. It's just landlocked, but a crossroad. So this importance, had been escalated right after 9/11, as you know. And we have witnessed a military intervention that was started by a coalition led by the United States as a response to 9/11. And the argument of the United States at that time was that there must be no Al-Qaeda that is hosted by Afghan government. Refused, and military operation had started. So right after that, we witness a total military intervention realized by the coalition. Okay, and later then, we witnessed NATO's presence over there, and the question should be why? I mean, why the coalition passed the authority to NATO in 4 different phases, starting from Kabul in the year 2006, starting from 2006. So, it's about shared burden. I mean, the United States, who is leading both the coalition and NATO, for my perspective, tried to, or attempted to, legitimize the overall operation by means of an institutionalized organization, and imagine that right after the transfer of authority, actually nothing had changed. Because it was still US commanders, US soldiers, who were leading the overall operation in terms of military. That's reality. So, NATO has realized one thing that is very important still today. Security cannot be provided only by military means. So, NATO had proposed one further dimension, development. Another dimension, administrative capacity in the region. It is an overall restructuring of a country in Afghanistan by the hands of Afghans and by the support of NATO countries. Okay, now we have to question if this attempt has succeeded or not, because still it continues. If you take security, still we are in between, because we have opponents in the field who resist a solution, peaceful coexistence, so it's problematic. In terms of development, I believe that there's a great effort in Afghanistan, and Lapis Lazuli corridor is a kind of, sample case to show the efforts of the Afghan government, because the major issue for Afghanistan is to link country with the appropriate markets. And the West appears to be the most suitable one because they can pay for what they buy. On the other hand, we know that there are competing routes at the north that is started by China, and that means there's a challenge. And another issue, there's an obstacle over there. It is the huge Iranian land that should be passed by means of land or Hazar Sea. So, in terms of economy, the efforts of Afghanistan must be supported by the ones who want to transform country towards a more prosperous one. I see that this effort is not that much adequate until now. Another issue is administrative capacity. Yes, it is a success. NATO, along with the participation of the Afghans themselves, started a process to reorganize the overall state, and now we have government of Afghanistan, we have a complete police structure, we have Afghan National Army, we have NDS, and also we have the other state-level organizations in country working. And in my second tour in Afghanistan, I had questioned if there is an organization to conduct a census, just to count the heads. And I discovered, yes, they have, and they do it in a different manner, but they do it. So that's one of the indicators that we should observe, to register people. Because if you don't register, you can't serve them. That's one basic indicator for administrative capacity. On the other hand, NATO, to erect these 3 principles or 3 different pillars, security, development, and administrative capacity, contributed until now, even though there are some fallacies, there are some faults, and security comes first in terms of deficiency. That's reality. And we have to know, or we have to be aware of the causes. For instance, for the security, one biggest and strategic mistake was in 2012. Obama clearly announced that the US soldiers will withdraw from Afghanistan in 2 years. So, it is perceived as a kind of victory in the eyes of Taliban. It was a mistake. For the development, we witnessed many conferences, say Tokyo, for instance, and there were pledges of the Western countries in millions, $100 million, more than $1 million, you know, many pledges from many different countries. Okay, but the question if Western states included the expenses of their military to this resource. If they did, and for sure some of them did, then it's not a transfer of wealthiness or a support to development in Afghanistan. Because you spare this money for your own soldier or personnel. And let's go to Turkey after NATO. Okay, Turkey had involved Afghanistan starting from 2012, as you know. And first assumed the responsibility of Kabul multinational brigade and also command of ISAF. And later than that, Turkey assumed responsibilities under NATO's authority, mainly first in Kabul, later than Vardak as running a PRT, Provincial Reconstruction Team, and afterwards at the north, another PRT. Okay, so what motivated Turkey to be involved in Afghanistan? The first answer can be originated from the history, because Turkish-Afghan relations started in 1921 officially, but we had relations due to Afghans' perspective towards caliphate in Istanbul. There was a great respect in the minds. And the first touch of Turkey with Afghanistan was in Kabul, not in Moscow. There were 3 officers who were prisoners of war in the World War I, and when they had reached to Kabul, they were introduced to Amanullah Khan. And there was a letter in their hand, but the initial official contact in Moscow appeared to be the first one, because these officers could not reach Anatolia before this agreement. Okay, right after that, there's a great assistance request from the Afghan governments, starting from 1921. Because the letter, the context of letter, made a request sending soldiers and teachers. And starting from this date, Turkey had built law faculty, university, trained and educated soldiers, and had led the intelligentsia in Kabul. We had some problems during the history, though. It appeared to be a kind of responsibility of brotherhood right after 2001. Because imagine that everybody was in Afghanistan except Turkey. Okay, it's unacceptable. And Turkey made a decision. Turkey will not assume a combat role in Afghanistan. This is the first issue. It was a clear caveat for NATO. And Turkey will contribute to welfare, prosperity, and development in Afghanistan. And the major mission that was clearly addressed to soldiers over there was this, not more. And just because of that, Turkey, for instance, provided access to Afghan civilians, the military camps. I was very surprised at that time. We had Camp Doğan, and imagine that you can't access any military base in Kabul, nothing, right? No. But as civilian, Afghan civilian, would just knock the door and go hospital by himself or herself, be treated, and later then have been medicated. Because this is what Turkey designed to be, as an actor to be in Afghanistan at that time. Okay. Turkey tried to or attempted to also contribute, especially to peace and reconciliation process, either under NATO or by means of the Turkish diplomats and, for instance, President Erdogan, because he delivered an efficient speech 2 years ago, I believe, in Kabul, and clearly announced that Turkey will be in Afghanistan unless Afghan says no. But this is not an interest-based approach. This is just a matter of states' responsibility, because we know that once states intervene, they just leave something behind that we cannot describe. And Turkey does not want it. Afghanistan is remote to our land, but we feel a kind of brothership, not only because religion, but kinship. This is the overall reason of Turkey's engagement to Afghanistan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for the presentations, and I'm going to give the floor to the audience. So please raise your hand and introduce yourself before ask your question. Evet. Arkada var bir tane. You can also ask your question in Turkish. We have a translation here.
Hello, my name is Bilgehan Öztürk from SETA Foundation. I would like to ask my question to His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, I would like to know about the position of Daesh and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Where do they stand in the general picture in terms of the peace talks, challenging the authorities, posing security challenges, and the state of play between them and Taliban? Thank you very much.
I'm going to collect the questions. Okay, another question?
Thanks for your speech and your explanations. I am really interested in how do you assess the announcement of the Trump administration to withdraw from the negotiation process with the Taliban, and especially here the ambassador, and I would like also to have an answer from Tanya. Why has Trump been withdrawn? What's its effect on the situation dynamics inside Afghanistan, and how it might affect the region?
Another question? Yes.
Hello, my name is Mehmet Çağatay from SETA Foundation. Thank you for your speeches. It was indeed very illuminating. My question will be for Dr. Murat Aslan. You have talked about the Turkey's past the interviews and the past things about the Afghanistan, but you haven't talked about the current situation, Turkey's current role in Afghanistan. So my question will be: is it realistic, and the situation on the Turkey's presence can be maintained in the current things going on Afghanistan? Thank you.
Any question? Any question in Turkish? You can ask your question in Turkish as well. Okay. You can, I mean, also elaborate Turkey's contribution, or if you like, what kind of, contribution does Turkey have in Afghanistan?
Regarding the Daesh, Al-Qaeda, and other terrorist group in Afghanistan, except Daesh does not have relation, because Daesh emerged in Afghanistan once some of the commanders and some of the people who are against the Taliban, so they change the flag, they become Daesh. But we don't have Daesh like in Syria and in Iraq. They are locally motivated people from the Syria, but not Arabs or they are as a Daesh. The Pakistanis in Afghan, they are in the border, they started from there. So they are, we can say that the renegated Taliban who are against the Taliban, more extreme ones, so they start to become Daesh, change the flag. And, but as long as the Taliban are continuing the fighting, so they are the sanctuary for the other terrorist groups. For example, in Afghanistan, the Al-Qaeda certainly is with the Taliban. They are instructed, they are also using their network in guiding the war with the Taliban. We have some people from China, from Uzbekistan, from Tajikistan, from Pakistan. All these terrorist groups, they are present, and also from some Arab countries. Except Daesh, the rest are under the protection of the Taliban. They are still in Afghanistan in supporting. And one of the conditions in the process, I mean, in the negotiation with the Taliban, which was raised by the United States, as well as if we start to directly talk, is that they should give up, not support anymore the terrorist group. And then, as in Afghan, they should sit down with the other Afghan and talk about the peace process. So all these groups exist in Afghanistan under the protection of the Taliban. In Taliban, they have their own protection from outside. In Daesh is one of other game, that, but they are not that much strong. I mean, our national defense forces, they don't have that much concern about Daesh. They've crushed them in most of the areas, but still they have some in some areas. But the near real network of the Al-Qaeda still exists in the area. In other regional extremist and terrorist group, they are under the umbrella of Al-Qaeda and under keeping their names. Work in the protection of Taliban still exists, and that's why we have to continue fighting against them. And this can be one of the reasons for the presence of the international community, because the mandate that they have taken is not fulfilled yet. So they have to support the Afghan government to get rid of these terrorists. The other issue was the Trump announcement of regarding their negotiation. That was. We supported at the beginning that because it may facilitate the direct negotiation between Afghanistan and also Taliban. So they have not succeeded. And officially, under the pretext that during the negotiations, so a big suicidal attack took place in Kabul, and one of the soldiers of American also were killed. So that was the pretext. Under that pretext, they postponed the negotiation. But I think the main reason, this was a pretext, but the main reason is that Taliban was given a kind of imaginary, I mean, some kind of expectation, prestige that they were not supposed to have that one. Taliban were not in the position to negotiate with the United States regarding the security in Afghanistan or future of Afghanistan. They are a militancy group supported. They don't have political vision. Americans understood that they don't have that capacity to decide. So they continue, spend so many days, months, but nothing. I personally have been in negotiation with the Taliban during the resistance. So in the negotiation, they are telling you, start the words or the conclusion, they tell at the beginning. Just say that we have this position. Mas khalas. You spend time for months, they repeat the same thing. So it is very difficult for even United States to see. They didn't see any change. Even they become harder. They thought that they have defeated everyone. They have defeated the United States, NATO, Afghan government. So they lost themselves. Otherwise, it was very good opportunity even for them, that they have accepted those 4 points and then come to start negotiation with Afghan government. So they had, I mean, Americans, they had the reasons to stop that one. And I hope that in the future, instead of direct negotiation with the Taliban, other like United States or other countries, force them to sit with the Afghan government. That will be much logical and it will give the result. Regarding the contribution in the role of Turkey in Afghanistan, besides that we have very historical brotherly relationship. Now we have in the area of the education, more than 4,000 students are studying in here. Every year through UTB we have more than 300 students are taking scholarship. And also privately, a lot of students coming and studying here. I think it is around altogether 4,000 or 5,000, something like that. So in the area of the training of our national defense forces, especially the empowerment and training of the women police forces, and the area of even the training of our soldiers, short-term training, and also in the area of the medical treatment, we have 250 quota for every year for the civilian, and another 200 for the military personnel who injured or become sick, coming see treatment here. TICA has very important role in Afghanistan in the reconstruction and also humanitarian assistance. They are working, they are very much involved and visible. In Afghanistan, people see the result of their work. The private companies, the contractors, the Turkish contractors, they do not afraid of the war. They participate in every bidding. They have very good presence. And also, some of the big companies, they have invested over there, especially in the field of energy. So, Turkey and Afghanistan will continue, inshallah, to help each other. And in the trade, inshallah, step by step, it will be increasing our trade volume. And hopefully continue. And even the Turkey, if you are very much engaged around yourself, otherwise, even in the peace process also can play a role. Turkey has very good influence on Pakistan. They have very good relation with them. In all groups in Afghanistan, they have very good relation with Turkey. I'm sure that in one point, even personally, President Erdogan himself can play a good role. We had before tri-party summit here, but that is another suggestion. It was supposed to take place, but practically it doesn't. But summit was just for summit. It was not practically affect the situation. That's why all sides, they are now working on it to see. In other development took place. That's why these initiatives. But we have Istanbul process. It was another very important process for confidence build up between the regional countries, and it is co-sponsored by, initiated by Turkey and Afghanistan, and co-sponsored, inshallah, in December we may have that meeting. So these are the process which are very much involved with Turkey over there in Afghanistan, and our people feeling very comfortable. With some countries, they may have their own ambitions, but with Turkey, just any assistance, any involvement in Afghanistan, from our point of view, it is enhancing our brotherly relation. Thank you.
Thank Thank you. Tanya?
Okay, well, I'll merge the two questions together in my answer. To start with, I think the US-Taliban talks were subject to controversy for several reasons. One of them is that the landscape in Afghanistan is not the same as today as it was in 2001. You're not looking at just the Taliban anymore. You're looking at a splintered Taliban. And as I mentioned earlier when I spoke, at least 20 groups and organizations fighting for different causes with different sources of funding and support. So, I mean, there's at least 8 of them that are prominent players. There are also reports that the Taliban negotiators in Doha were not necessarily seeing eye to eye with the Taliban commanders on the ground. So there were people expressing legitimate concern that what's the use of coming to an agreement with the Taliban if what they agree to in Doha is not going to be respected on the ground. There were also concerns that the way the Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad was going about the whole thing was giving much more weight and legitimacy to an armed insurgency group than was proper. And that much of the talks were going on in secrecy, even though there were reports that the president and the government were being briefed. So in terms of why President Trump suddenly canceled or at least put the talks on hold, I agree with the ambassador that there was of course that one trigger, but I think it was bigger than that. And some people like to say that President Trump operates a little bit like a businessman. So there's the likelihood that he is trying to get leverage back. Because there was a point where it appeared as though the Taliban was calling the shots. The Taliban was making the Americans make all the concessions. So by suddenly pulling back and saying, well, you know, we're going to wait and see and have elections, talk of interim government was suddenly taken off the table. Elections were held, and immediately you saw the Taliban scramble for regional support. They were shuttling back and forth from Moscow to Tehran to Beijing looking for support. So that could be one theory as to why he did it, to get a little bit of leverage back on the table on the American side. That said, I don't think the talks are canceled. I think that there's every likelihood that they will resume in another form, because the Americans haven't changed their policy. They still do want to withdraw, partially at least. And for the most part, the Afghans want the American presence to be reduced as well. Well, I'll leave it there. I won't answer the Turkish question. I will leave that to Dr. Murat over here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Yes.
Actually, Mr. Ambassador clearly answered the question directed at me because he just portrayed what Turkey is doing in Afghanistan.
But how about the political transition?
Okay, the current situation, first and foremost, Turkey is with Afghanistan. You know, let me just give an example, you know, with Libya. Now we have Haftar over there, and there are countries supporting Haftar or legitimate government in Tripoli. But imagine that for Afghanistan, there is no such thing. And Turkey is with Afghan government politically. This is the first issue. The second one, is it realistic? Yes, it is realistic. Because legitimacy defines everything. If Afghan government is elected by the public itself, within democratic norms, and if there is an functioning mechanism in the country, that means there's no problem. Third thing, up to now, Turkey identified priorities in coordination with Afghan government. TICA is one example for that. I remember one undertaking of TICA, for instance. Imagine that the most delicious apples in country is in Vardak. And what was the problem? The problem was that there was no frigo to keep it cool, you know. And TICA just started an initiative at that time and built it. Turkey is over there to assist Afghans and improve their infrastructure. And the main tool in Afghanistan is formed on the axis of assistance in the eyes of Turkey. For the political aspect of, the problem, if it exists, Turkey is with the legitimate Afghan government. That's the end state,
Okay. Any question? Okay. Tamam. Can you please?
İsmim Müzeyyen Öztepe.
Bir dakika. Tamam. Evet. Açıldı galiba. Tamam herhalde. Tamam, bir vur tepesine vur, çalışıyor. Tamam,
Evet.
çalışıyor.
My name is Müzeyyen Öztepe. I'm from Ankara Hacı Bayram Veli University. I'm a fourth year student in history department. I'm going to have two questions. The first question is, the election was made in Afghanistan and the results are being awaited. So, is Taliban going to accept the result of this election? Because you said previously it took 6 months. So the people will accept, even if the people will accept, will Taliban accept the result of the election? So will democracy be really there in the country? That was the first question. Now the second question. When democracy is formed, who will be the guarantor states? As far as I see, China makes big investments in Afghanistan. So about the underground richnesses. So I believe the war will become even more. So what will be the guarantor states? Are they going to exploit those underground resources? And will Afghanistan be a national state where Afghan people benefit those resources? Thank you.
Two questions.
This is a wish that we all Afghans, our slogan is that we are asking Taliban to come and participate in the democratic process. They don't believe that. Ideologically, they don't believe on democracy and also not believe on election. They still call themselves the Emirat, and Emirat, a few people sit together and ask. So they don't believe in them, and they are a militant group, a militia. They are just fighting. They are not part of the process yet. Election is the part of the process which the government of Afghanistan, the people of Afghanistan, for the better governance is done that, and it's happened without the Taliban are not part of the election to accept or not accept. Fight is continuing, and the government of Afghanistan defending themselves and fighting against the terrorists. So that is not issue, but the importance that after the result announced, so the parties who participated, the candidate, once they accept, so hopefully this is what everybody have agreed. Whatever the election commission announced, they will accept and congratulate each other, and then the new president will form the government and will continue. So this is the process. So Taliban is not involved on that. On the issues, who's the guarantor of the democracy in Afghanistan and development? Once the peace process come, once the stability come, the people of Afghanistan themselves, they are the guarantor of keeping the. There is no way other except democracy, because it is a country with different ethnic group. Very, how to convince each other. Parties, this is now the accepted way of governance, that the democracy, it is, everybody should accept, even the Taliban. I'm sure that during the negotiation, they will raise this issue of that, the system of the governance. So that is something which after the negotiation, and they should accept and join the process. And also those countries who come and supported Afghanistan and still are in Afghanistan, I'm sure that once everybody participated in defending the security of Afghanistan, they also defend the democracy in the development of Afghanistan. And inshallah, everything will be all right. But once the war is continued, everything is difficult. Thank you.
Tanya, would you like to also answer the questions?
Well, I can answer part of it. Certainly, the Taliban has made no secret of its opposition to the entire system in place at the moment. Their endgame has been to reinstall the Islamic Emirate that was dismantled in 2001. They have refused to accept the republic, the state. So it's like they want to rewrite the rules rather than join the game, even though the government has numerous times extended an invitation. So whether or not they accept the outcome of this election is less an issue for me, because that's pretty predictable. More important is whether the rival candidates will accept the outcome. Once the final outcome of the election is announced, whether they will accept it or whether they will continue to dispute and cause problems.
Okay, thank you. Başka soru yok herhalde. Okay, I'm closing the panel. First of all, I would like to really thank you for coming and accepting our invitation, His Excellency Mr. Ambassador. Tanya, you are coming from Istanbul. Thank you so much. Dr. Murat, thank you for sharing your knowledge about Afghanistan. And I would like to thank you also for coming to this panel today, and hope to see you our next panel. Thank you.